Assalamu alaikum class. I hope that you are fine and well by the grace of Allah, inshallah. In lecture 38 and 39 of our course, Signals and Systems, we are going to discuss some properties of DTFT, discrete time Fourier transform. The portion we are going to discuss today is covered in article 5.3 to 5.5 of our textbook. The properties of DTFT that we will be discussing in this lecture set include periodicity, linearity, time and frequency shifting, conjugation and conjugate symmetry, differencing and accumulation. Here differencing is the discrete time equivalent of differentiation in time, frequency differentiation, time reversal and time scaling, Parseval's relation, convolution and multiplication. The names of these properties will be sounding very familiar because barring one or two, we have done these properties in rest of the Fourier analysis techniques. So we'll be quickly going through this lecture set and we'll be doing only those examples which are slightly different from what we have done earlier. First property that we will be discussing is periodicity. As already discussed in lecture 37, DTFT is periodic with a period of 2 pi. And we remember from last lecture that this periodicity arises because discrete time frequencies are distinct if they lie within the interval 0 to 2 pi. Otherwise, afterwards, the discrete time frequencies are indistinguishable. So this periodicity in omega can be written as x of e j omega plus 2 pi is equal to x e j omega. The DTFT, like rest of the Fourier analysis techniques, is a linear operation. So this linearity can be written as if x1 of n has a Fourier transform of x1 e j omega and x2 of n has a Fourier transform of x2 e j omega, then the DTFT is a linear operation, which means that it will obey the properties of both homogeneity and additivity. The property of homogeneity implies that if the input is being multiplied by a factor, then the Fourier transform or the Fourier frequency spectrum is being multiplied by the same constant, same scalar constant. And additivity implies that if the input or if the signal, time domain signal, is such that the signal is a sum of two or more signals, then in the output the Fourier transform will be such that it will be a sum of the Fourier transforms of the original individual time domain signals, which means that the type of property, the form of this property that we've been discussing so far, ax1 of n plus bx2 of n has a DTFT of ax1 e j omega plus bx2 e j omega. The third property is the time shifting property, which says that if a signal x of n has a Fourier transform of x e j omega, then if we shift the signal by n naught units, then in the frequency domain, the frequency spectrum is being multiplied by a factor e minus j omega n naught. Or in the frequency domain, the frequency content of the signal remains the same, but the phase of the signal changes by a factor of e minus j omega n naught. For this phase factor, we can see that the slope is in n naught. This was done in detail when we were doing the continuous time Fourier transform, where we saw that this can also be termed as a linear addition of a linear phase term in the phase of this x of e j omega. This time shifting property has been consistent in all the Fourier analysis techniques as well as the Laplace transform, where we observe that the sign of the shift is the same, appears in the sign of the exponential, complex exponential. So here we have a minus n naught, then over here we have minus n naught appearing. The next property is the frequency shifting property, which can be stated as if x of n has a Fourier transform of x e j omega. Then if the spectrum of the Fourier transform is shifted by omega naught units, in the time domain we have a complex exponential e j omega naught n appearing or being multiplied by the time domain signal x of n. Like always, this frequency shifting property can be stated from a time domain perspective also, which says that if in the time domain a complex exponential is being multiplied by the time domain signal, then in the frequency domain the spectrum of the signal is shifted by omega naught units or by the same frequency as the complex exponential in the time domain. This frequency shifting property has been used to analyze the modulation, the amplitude modulation in Fourier transform, and we were discussing Fourier transform, the continuous time Fourier transform. In addition to analyzing amplitude modulation signals by using the frequency shifting property, this property can be used to design high pass, band pass and band stop filters given a low pass filter. As an example, look at the frequency response shown in figure A. If we look at this response, we can say that this response is for a discrete time input signal because this response is periodic. Also, since we are following our book's convention, whenever there is a response, the frequency response or the transform of a discrete time signal, the factor e j omega is used, and if it is a continuous time signal, we use only omega in the brackets. So we have to see what is the time domain expression h high pass n for h high pass e j omega, which is given in figure B. So as we had already discussed in the filters, when we were discussing filters, that this is the response for a discrete time high pass filter. So this discrete time high pass filter can also be said or can also be thought of as a shifted version of this low pass filter. And by how many units is this response shifted? Since initially we had 0 here and now after shifting we have pi here, this means that the response is shifted by pi units of time. So now the response is h lp e j omega minus pi. We could have thought of this response as being shifted in either direction, either right or left, by pi units of time, and it would have given us the same answer. Over here, e j omega minus pi signifies that the response is shifted right by pi units of time. The figures are reproduced on this slide. Now it is clear from figure 2, which is the lower figure, that h high pass e j omega is equal to h low pass e j omega minus pi. So from frequency shifting property, we know that if a sequence x of n has a transform x e j omega, then if the transform is shifted by omega naught units to the right, then we have e j omega naught n appearing with the time domain signal. We remember that in the frequency shifting property, the sign of the complex exponential and the sign of the shift is opposite. So since this shift is by pi units in the low pass filter's response for the high pass filter, when we transform the response from a low pass filter to high pass filter, we shift right by pi units of time. Therefore, in the time domain, we have e j pi n being multiplied by h low pass n. Now the left hand side of this expression is h high pass n. Therefore, h high pass n is equal to e j pi n into h low pass n. If we open e j pi n by Euler's formula, we have cos pi n plus j sin pi n. Now sin of n pi is 0 for all values of n, whereas cos of n pi alternates between +1 and -1 depending upon the values of n, which is equal to -1 raised to the power n h low pass n. Therefore, the If we want to convert a low pass filter into a high pass filter in the time domain, we just alternate the sign of the odd coefficients. This can be seen in the next slide as. Now, discrete time Fourier transform pair 10 from table 5.2 states that if x of e j omega is a rectangular function with width to w, the time domain function is sine wn by pi n, which is a very famous Fourier transform pair that a rectangular function has a sinc as the transform and vice versa. So this low pass filter, the ideal low pass filter, had a width of 2 omega c. So we replace 2 omega c in the formula. Therefore, the low pass filter response is sine omega c n by pi n, provided the cutoff frequency omega c is between 0 to pi. Therefore, the high pass filter response HPN is minus 1 is to the power n sine of omega c n by pi n, provided the cutoff frequency is between 0 to pi radians. Now, if we substitute values of cutoff frequency and we vary n, we'll get values for the high pass filter. Similarly, we will see that these values could have been obtained by determining the direct Fourier transform of the high pass filter response, but this determining the response through application of properties is an easier way to determine the response given the transform pairs. The next property that we will be discussing is the conjugation property and the extension of the conjugation property to conjugate symmetry property for real signals. The conjugate property states that if x of n has a Fourier transform x of e j omega, then if we take the complex conjugate of x of n to form x conjugate of n, the Fourier transform is x conjugate e minus j omega. The right hand side of this equation implies that not only the Fourier transform is a conjugate of the original Fourier transform, but also the frequencies of the Fourier transform are replaced by minus frequencies. So if we had a particular response at a frequency omega is equal to pi by 4, now that response will be appearing at a frequency omega is equal to minus pi by 4. Now if x of n is real valued, then its transform x of e j omega is conjugate symmetric. By real valued signal we mean that it does not have any imaginary part, it has the real part only. So now x of e j omega is the same as x conjugate of e minus j omega because the signal did not have a complex part. So for a real signal, the real part of x e j omega is an even function of omega and the imaginary part of x of g omega is an odd function of omega. We remember that Fourier transform x of e j omega was a complex function of omega. It had both a magnitude and a phase if we express it in polar coordinates, and if we express it in rectangular coordinates, it had a real part and an imaginary part. So the real part is represents the in fact the inverse Fourier transform of the real part is the even part of the signal, and the inverse Fourier transform of the imaginary part of x e j omega after being multiplied by j is equal to the odd part of the signal. So this is the conjugate symmetry property, and these properties are also listed in table 5.1 of our book. The next property is differencing and accumulation. Now differencing for a discrete time signal is equivalent to taking a derivative. So for the differencing property, we will be using both linearity and time shifting. So the Fourier transform for a first difference x of n minus x of n minus 1 is 1 minus e j omega into x of e j omega. Similarly, if we accumulate the signal, that is, if we add multiple samples for x of m from minus infinity to n, Then the Fourier transform is 1 by 1 minus e j omega x of e j omega plus pi x e j of 0. K varies from minus infinity to plus infinity del omega minus 2 pi k. This second, the term appearing after the plus sign of the second term implies that x of ej0 is the response of the original signal, is the frequency response of the original signal at omega is equal to 0. And since the Fourier transform is periodic, so we'll be having an impulse appearing after every 2 pi samples, 2 pi multiples of k rather, 2 pi, and the amplitude of this impulse will be pi times the value at x of ej0. So the impulse train on the right hand side also reflects the DC or average value that can result from summation. The next property is the frequency differentiation property. A derivative of the Fourier transform is possible because it is a continuous function of frequency. So now if a function x of n has a Fourier transform x of e j omega, and if we have a new Fourier transform such that it is the derivative of the Fourier transform x of e j omega, then in the time domain there will be an n appearing next to the function or the sequence x of n, and on the right side we also have a j. This j, as we have already discussed in CTFT case, can either appear on the right hand side or the left hand side. If it is on the left hand side, then it will be minus j. The frequency differentiation property can also be stated from a time domain perspective, which is if there is a factor n being multiplied by a discrete time sequence, then the Fourier transform of the signal will be a derivative of the Fourier transform x of e j omega and multiplied by factor phase factor j. The next property is the time reversal property. This property states that if a function x of n has a Fourier transform x of e j omega, then if we reverse the function in time such that it becomes x of minus n, the Fourier transform of the new sequence is also reversed. It is x of e minus j omega. Now if you look at your book, after every 2 or 3 properties there is an example to solve which uses these properties. For this lecture I am not going through all the examples because this is the 4th instance of studying the properties and almost all types of examples are being done by you. I'll be only covering the examples which are slightly different. That is why till property 8 we have just covered one example. The next property that we are going to discuss is time scaling. Now from our knowledge of CTFT, we know that the time scaling property implies that if there is an expansion in the time domain signal, there is a compression in the Fourier transform or in the frequency content and vice versa. However, in discrete time sequences, the time scaling takes a different form because we know that the index of the discrete time signal can only be an integer. It cannot take a fractional value. So, for instance, if for the signal x a of n, if a is not an integer, we cannot have values of x a of n unless the argument is an integer. So we cannot slow the signal by choosing a is less than 1. If, however, a is not 1, for example, if we take x2 of n, then x2 of n consists of even samples of x of n because n will be, when n will be 0, we'll be having x of 0. When n will be 1, the new signal will have a value of x2 at its first sample and so forth. So it will be having even samples of x of n alone. So that is why in your book time scaling property is only considered in the form of time expansion. So the property states that if x of n has a transform x of e j omega and we form a new signal, a new expanded signal such that x parenthesis kn is xn by k, if n is a multiple of k, then the transform of the signal is x, e, j, k omega. Now you can observe that the expansion factor k is being multiplied by the frequency term. So now the frequencies will be squeezed by the same factor k. So let's solve an example to see how this property works in the discrete time. Before solving the example, here's a pictorial representation. If we had x of n pulse function, then the Fourier transform of the function was of this form. Now if we expand the function by 2, then the Fourier transform is now a squeezed by 2 version of the Fourier transform x of e j omega. Similarly, if we expand the function by a factor of 3, then the Fourier transform is a further squeezed version of the original function x e j omega, and the amount of the squeeze is squeezed by a factor of 3. This x of e j omega is a 3 times squeezed version of x of e j omega. So the concept is same. Expansion in time domain is a compression in the frequency domain or frequency content of the signal. So now we have to determine the DTFT of the signal shown in figure. Now for this signal x of n, we see that it has only 10 samples from 0 to 9, and the samples are such that they alternate between 1 and 2. So therefore we can decompose x of n into 2 signals, where the first signal has a sample at 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8, every other value with the value is 1, and x2 of n, this signal has values at 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9, and the magnitude is 2. So x of n is x1 of n plus x2 of n. Now first of all, we'll be considering x1 of n individually. Now if we observe x1 of n, we can say that this x1 of n is basically a 2 times expanded version of y1 of n, because y1 of n is a signal which has 5 samples, and all these samples had a value of 1. So if we expand or scale this function by a factor of 2, we have x1 of n. So we can say that x1 of n is y1 2 of n. Now if we consider y1 of n, we can say that this function is a shifted gate function. For example, since this function has a width of 5 samples, if we had a normal rectangular gate function, we could have written it as rect n by 5. So this y1 of n is determined from this rectangular pulse, and it is shifted by 2 units on the right, because initially the point minus 2 is now appearing at 0 for the signal. Now using table 5.2 formula 9, for a rectangular function, the Fourier transform is a sinc function, which is sine n1 plus 1 by 2 into omega by sine of omega by 2. So using this transform pair as well as the time shifting property, which states that if in the time domain the function is shifted by n naught units of time, then in the frequency domain this n naught is being multiplied by a complex exponential, So rect n minus 2 by 5 has a Fourier transform e minus j omega 2 omega sine 5 omega by 2 by sine of omega by 2. Now for determining x1 of e j omega, we'll be using the time scaling property and determining x1 e j omega. Using the time scaling property, for x1 of n, the Fourier transform is y1 e j2 omega, because y1 is being expanded by a factor of 2, and as we discussed in the slides just a while ago, that if a function is being expanded by a certain factor, k, then in the frequency domain, the spectrum is being scaled by the same factor k. So x1 of ej omega is y1 ej2 omega. So in the expression of y1, wherever we have omega appearing, we'll replace it by 2 omega. So we replace omega by 2 omega over here, here, and here, and as a result, for x1 of ej omega, we get e minus j4 omega sine of omega by sine of sine of 5 omega by sine of omega. Similarly, for x2 of n, if we observe x2 of n, we can see that basically this can be derived from the same y1 of n as the x1 of n. So first of all, we have 2 y1 of n, then we expand this y1 of n by a factor of 2, and ultimately we shift it towards right by 1 unit. So y2 of ej omega after applying all these transformation will be 2 e minus j4 omega sine omega 5 omega by sine omega, and after being, this is y2 of omega, and after we multiply, after we shift it by 1 unit, and the Fourier transform is being multiplied by e minus j omega, so we get 2 e minus j5 omega sine 5 omega by sine of omega. Finally, substituting the values of x1 ej omega and x2 ej omega, we get x of ej omega is equal to x1 ej omega plus x2 ej omega, and after substituting the values, the expression for x of ej omega comes out to be e minus j4 omega 1 plus 2 e minus j omega sine 5 omega by sine of omega. So we see that the Fourier transform of a signal like that shown in this example can be obtained by applying the time scaling or time expansion property. The next property is the Parseval's relation. It describes the relationship between time and frequency domain energy of the signal. The relationship states that the signal energy derived from time domain is the same as the signal energy derived from the frequency domain. So the signal energy can be determined by integrating the energy per unit frequency x ej omega whole square over 2 pi over a full 2 pi interval of distinct discrete time frequencies. So just comparison or comparing it with the continuous time case, it is analogous, and this x of ej omega can be termed as the energy density spectrum of the signal. So we remember that the signals we are considering in this case are aperiodic signals for the DTFT. In comparison, when we were doing periodic signals for discrete time and continuous time Fourier series, we were looking at the Parseval's relation from a power point of view. So for that case, the Parseval's relations equated the average power in the periodic signal with the sum of average power of its individual harmonic components. The next property we are going to discuss is the convolution property. Convolution property is mostly used to determine the output of a discrete time or continuous time LTI system given the input x of n and the impulse response h of n. So if we have the input x of n, the impulse response h of n with us, then the output y of n is the convolution of x of n and h of n, and the output, the Fourier transform of the output y of ej omega will be a product of the Fourier transform of the input x of ej omega and the Fourier transform of h of n, which is h of ej omega. Now the Fourier transform of h of n, which is h of ej omega, is also termed as the frequency response of the system, as we have already discussed. So as is the case with all types of Fourier analysis equations, the convolution in time is converted into multiplication in frequency domain. the final property we are discussing today is the multiplication property. If we have a signal x1 of n whose Fourier transform is given by x1 of e j omega, and we have another signal x2 of n whose Fourier transform is given by x2 e j omega, and we form a third signal x of n which is a product of these two signals, then the Fourier transform of the product signal will be a integral of the Fourier transforms of these two signals which we use in the product. So this expression in the integral represents a convolution in the frequency domain. However, we know that the signals x1 e j omega and x2 e j omega are periodic over a period of 2 pi. So the integration or the convolution that we are going to do is going to be over an interval of length 2 pi. This convolution is known as periodic convolution. In contrast, we have done aperiodic convolution or convolution where the integral ranged from minus infinity to infinity. This is sometimes also known as the periodic convolution property. Since we have not done periodic convolution so far, so we'll be using the periodic convolution property to determine the Fourier transform of a signal x of n, which is a product of x1 of n and x2 of n, where x1 of n is given by a sinc function sine 3 pi n by 4 by pi n, and x2 of n is given by sine pi n by 2 by pi of n. Now for formula 10 of table 5.2 gives a Fourier transform pair, rect sinc transform pair. So if we have a Fourier transform sine wn by pi n, the frequency domain, in the frequency domain we have a rectangular function where the width of the rectangular function is 2w, and x of e j omega is periodic with a period of 2 pi. So when w1 is 3 pi by 4 as is given for the signal x1 of n, x1 of e j omega is a rectangular function where its value is 1 for 0 to 3 pi by 4, and it is 0 otherwise. So this is how the function will look like. Similarly, if we want to plot this signal, since we know that the signal is periodic with a period of 2 pi, so here shown in the figure is when the signal is repeated for the interval 0 to 2 pi, or when the replica of the signal is produced, and we can see that since the signal is periodic, so the point minus pi plus 2 pi comes over here, and this part is drawn here as we have discussed in the lecture 37. So now for omega 2, w2 is pi by 2, we have x2 e j omega is again a gate function or rectangular function. It is 1 for 0 to omega 0, between 0 to pi by 2 and 0 otherwise. So plotting such a function for between minus pi to pi, and plotting this between for all values, drawing it such that it is clear that it is periodic. So again we know that from this signal how to form a periodic signal. So the Fourier transform of x of n will be determined using frequency convolution property. X of e j omega is the convolution of x1 of e j omega and x2 of e j omega. Now this formula, if you observe this formula has a similar form to what we did for continuous time signals, where we change variable from t to tau. So for one function the variable is changed, and for the other function the variable is first changed to tau, and then it's flipped to minus tau. Finally it is shifted by tau units. So here instead of tau we are using phi or theta is the running variable. Now Since it's a periodic convolution, but this can be solved by considering the signal x2 e j omega, which was the shorter of the two functions, as an aperiodic function such that it exists from minus pi to pi and it is zero otherwise. So this convolution can be done by using conventional convolution method. So when we substitute these values in the formula for x1 of ej theta and x2 aperiodic j theta, it is the same as integrating the function between minus pi to pi or minus infinity to infinity. Now over here I have drawn the functions such that the change of variables is visible. So we can see that first of all x1 ej theta is plotted, or the x's for the function x1 e j omega is changed to theta now. We remember that the convention we follow, or the method we follow, is generally we retain the larger function as it is, and we flip and slide the smaller function. So we have the 3 pi by 4 width function is the larger one, and the pi by 2 width function is a smaller one. So we'll flip and slide x2 e j omega. So first of all, we form x2 e minus j theta, which is the same as x2 e j theta since the function was symmetric. Then we shift the function by omega units. So this point becomes omega plus pi by 2 and this point becomes omega minus pi by 2. Generally, whenever I draw this function j omega minus theta or jt minus tau, I always used to draw it on the left side of the axis. This time I wanted to draw it on the right side of the axis. So now we are going to convolve this x1 ej theta by this x2 cap ej omega minus theta. Now we'll solve this convolution by our usual flip and slide method. Now both the functions have an amplitude of 1, but the shorter function I have just for illustration purposes I have drawn it through a function which has which appears to have a smaller magnitude, but both the functions have the same magnitude. Also for the shorter function, it has a width of pi units, and the larger function, it has a gap of pi by 2 between its adjacent samples. So the width of the shorter function is greater than the gap between two adjacent samples. Because of this, we'll be having 5 regions. The first region is in such a way that the shorter function, or x2 ej omega minus theta, will be overlapping with both these pulses. Then the next range will be when this shorter function is just partially overlapping with the main center of this x1 ej theta. Then the third range will be a full overlap. Fourth range will be again a partial overlap with the main lobe only. I'll just call it the main lobe, or the center of the gate function, central gate function, it's a better term I guess. And the fifth will be when it will be partially overlapping with both these, the central gate function and the side gate function. However, it should be kept in mind that the range of our integration is going to be between minus pi to pi. So for we'll be starting our lower limit from minus pi, and we have to see what the upper limit is. So for the upper limit, we'll observe that this trend will continue as long as this end is less than 5 pi by 4. Whenever this end becomes 5 pi by 4, the partial overlap with the gate on the left will discontinue. So omega minus pi by 2 is equal to minus 5 pi by 4, which gives omega is equal to minus 3 by 4 pi. So our upper limit 1 modifies to minus pi. This range is from minus pi to minus 3 pi by 4. Now substituting the limits and seeing the integration. The first part of partial overlap is between omega minus pi by 2 to 5 pi by 4, and the second part is between minus 3 pi by 4 to omega plus pi by 2. So that is what is done, and once we integrate it and substitute limits, we get 1 by 4 as an answer. So as long as we have a range, the frequencies between minus pi to 3 pi by 4, we'll be getting 1 by 4 as the value of x of g omega, e g omega. For the second region, again we have the limit will be starting from omega is greater than minus 3 pi by 4, and it will continue till we have a partial overlap with the central gate function only. So on this partial overlap with the central gate function continues till this omega minus pi by 2 is less than this 3 minus 3 pi by 4. The moment it becomes equal to this minus 3 pi by 4, we'll start to have a full overlap. So determining the upper limit to, we have omega is equal to minus pi by 4. So now our range of frequencies for the region 2 is from minus 3 pi by 4 to minus pi by 4. Now to determine the convolution, we know that when both these functions overlap, the lower limit for the integral is minus 3 pi by 4 and the upper limit is omega plus pi by 2. So we integrate and we substitute values and we get 1 by 2 pi omega plus 5 pi by 4. This is the equation of a line, so this is this will be a function which will be having an increasing slope. The region 3 is full overlap region. So now both these gate functions are fully overlapping, or we could say that the smaller gate function is fully overlapping with the wider gate function. So this region starts when omega is greater than minus pi by 4, and this continues till this omega plus pi by 2 is equal to 3 pi by 4. After this omega plus pi by 2 is greater than 3 pi by 4, this end goes out and we will not be having a full overlap. So when we solve this expression, we have omega is equal to pi by 4. So our range modifies as omega is, for this range, omega is between minus pi by 4 and plus pi by 4. When we take the convolution integral for these values, since because of the full overlap, the lower limit for integration is omega minus pi by 2 and the upper limit for integration is omega plus pi by 2. So once we integrate it and we substitute limits, we get a value of 1 by 2, fixed value of 1 by 2 for x of e g omega in the region 3. For region 4, when the shorter width function goes beyond the main gate function, the central gate function, now again we have a partial overlap, and this partial overlap continues till this omega plus pi by 2 is less than 5 pi by 4. Because the moment this omega plus pi by 2 becomes greater than 5 pi by 4, then we'll be having a situation where this function will be overlapping with both ends. So when we substitute the values and determine the upper limit, it comes out to be 3 pi by 4. So for region 4, we have a range of frequencies from pi by 4 or omega is greater than pi by 4 to omega is greater than equal to 3 pi by 4. Now when we integrate these two functions and multiply them, the lower range of integration is omega minus pi by 2 and the upper range of integration is 3 pi by 4. So integrating the function between these limits gives us a value of x of e g omega is equal to 1 by 2 pi 5 pi by 4 minus omega. Now because of negative omega, this equation of straight line represents a decaying or a falling slope. Finally, for region 5 can be solved in two ways. Either we can apply all this method, all the steps that we have done for region 1, or we can apply symmetry, so it's your choice. I am applying symmetry property because it's easy, and I can have x of e omega is equal to 1 by 4. You'll be deriving this yourself and determining the range to see whether it comes 1 by 4 or not. So all these 5 regions, the value of x of e omega between minus pi to pi is, it is 1 by 4, between minus pi to minus 3 pi by 4. It is a rising slope between minus 3 pi by 4 and minus pi by 4. It has a value of 1 by 2 between this range. It has value of 1 by 2 pi, 5 by 4, minus omega between this range, and finally it has a value of 1 by 4. For these two ranges, for region 2 and region 4, I have derived values to see whether there was a gap in the magnitude or not. So I have substituted for the region 2, I have substituted values, or I have determined values at the endpoints by substituting omega is equal to minus 3 pi by 4 and minus pi by 4, and I get 1 by 4 and 1 by 2 at these endpoints. Similarly, for region 4, I get a value of 1 by 2 and 1 by 4 at the endpoints. So when I plot this function between minus pi to minus 3 pi by 4, we know it had a value of 1 by 4, so the value is 1 by 4. Between minus 3 pi by 4 and minus pi by 4, it was an increasing slope, as we saw, and at the end points, at the lower end point, we had a value of 1 by 4, and at the upper end point, we had a value of 1 by 2, which is as shown. Then between minus pi by 4 to pi by 4, we had a value of half, so it is here. Then for pi by 4 to 3 pi by 4, we had a decreasing slope with 1 by 2 as the starting point and 1 by 4 as the ending point, which is drawn here. And finally, between 3 pi by 4 and pi, we had a value of 1 by 4 as shown here. And as we can see that the magnitude spectrum is even symmetric. But since we know that the spectrum is periodic, so drawing the periodic spectrum, we get this shape. Now it is up to you to determine that how this shape is drawn. Now all the properties that we have discussed so far can be combined to form or determine solutions for complex problems, which is going to be shown on the next slide. Using a combination of properties that we have discussed so far, we are going to solve this question where we are given 4 facts about a real signal x of n with Fourier transform x of e omega. Now the signal is real, which means that our property of conjugation and conjugate symmetry can be applied on the signal. Now the first fact is x of n is 0 for n is greater than 0, which means that the value of xn at n is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so forth is 0, which means it's a non-causal signal. Then the value of x of 0 at n is equal to 0 is not 0. That is, we have a value and the value is greater than 0. Then the third fact is imaginary x of e omega is sine of omega minus sine of 2 omega. And the final property is that from the signal energy is given by 3. The signal energy is 3. So let's use these properties to determine signal x of n. Now first of all, I'll be using fact 3, where fact 3 says that the imaginary part of x of e omega is sine omega minus sine 2 omega. Now from conjugate symmetry property, we know that the even part of the signal is equal to real x of e omega and the odd part of the signal is equal to j imaginary x of e omega. We also know that the even part of the signal is x of n plus x of minus n by 2 and the odd part of the signal is x of n minus x of minus n by 2. So now determining j imaginary x of e omega, we substitute values of imaginary x of e omega and multiply it by j. Or using Euler's formula to open the signs, we get this value, and in the next step the j's in the denominator get cancelled, 1 by 2 gets out of the brackets, and we have e j omega minus e exponential minus j omega minus exponential of j2 omega plus exponential of minus j2 omega. Now x odd of n is the inverse Fourier transform of j imaginary x of e j omega. So it is, once we determine the inverse transform, we apply this time shifting property. So now, since this complex exponential has a magnitude of 1 and it has a phase of e j omega, it means that the inverse transform of 1 is del of t, and now del of t is shifted by 1 unit on the right because the magnitude of the complex exponential is plus, so the shift is in plus direction. So we have del n plus 1. For this term we have minus del of n minus 1. For this term we have del minus del of n plus 2, and for this term we have plus del of n minus 2. So this is our first equation. Now proceeding further, we have from fact 1 x of n is equal to 0 for n is greater than 0. Now we know that the odd part of a signal is given by this expression. So if we take 2 on one side, we have 2x naught n is equal to x of n minus x of minus n. Also, we from equation 1, we know that if we take 2 on left hand side of the expression, we have 2x naught of n is equal to half del of n plus 1 minus del of n minus 1 minus del of n plus 2 plus del of n minus 2. So we quote both these equations. On the left hand side we have this expression, on the right hand side we have expression from equation 1, and I rearrange the terms. Now since we know that x of n is 0 for n is greater than 0, this means that these two impulses which are for positive values of negative values of n, which are for this value is at n is equal to minus 1 and this impulse is at n is equal to minus 2. So these two impulses belong to x of n and these two impulses belong to x of minus n, because this impulse is at is n equal to 1 and this impulse is at n is equal to minus 2. So now we have x of minus 2 is equal to minus 1 and x of minus 1 is equal to 1. So we have to determine x of 0 now. So to determine x of 0, we will be using the fact 4, which states that the signal energy is equal to 3. So the signal energy is given by this formula, and for the current signal we know that we have samples at n is equal to minus 2, minus 1 and 0. So we open the summation. So we have x0 magnitude square plus x1 magnitude square plus x2 magnitude square. We don't have the value of x0 with us, we'll let it remain as such. x1, the value of x1 is 1 and the value of x2 is minus 1, but once we take the magnitude square we get a value of 1. So we solve this expression, and for x0 magnitude square we get 1. If we take the under root, we get x0 is equal to plus minus 1. So fact 1 states that x0 0 is greater than 0. Since minus 1 is less than 0, so we have x of 0 is 1 and x of n is equal to del of n plus del of n minus 1 minus del of n plus 2, which is the expression. Here is a pictorial representation of the signal. This concludes today's lecture. You have to solve examples 5.1 to 5.15 and problems 5.1 to 5.15 to understand the concepts which have been covered in this week. Please go through these examples and numericals, and in case you have any problem, you're most welcome to contact me by any means, say WhatsApp, call, email, and I'll be sure to answer you. Wishing you happy studying. All the best. Allah Hafiz.